everybody, welcome back to Mastering Avantra. Today's topic is all about the enhancements we're bringing to the platform with 2111 for our developers, because let's face it, the platform is just that, a development platform. And who better to take us through a lot of these features than our own product manager, Oliver Rogers. Ollie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me back, Brenton.
You misbehaved the last time, but we said we'd bring you back this time.
That is true.
Fantastic. Look, we've a lot to cover, and I know we try to keep these videos short. So at a high level, tell us why we're focused in this direction in kind of 30 seconds, and then let's just start looking at the features one by one to show folks what they can start playing with.
We believe the features of Avantra that allow our customers to respond to change are what make Avantra such a powerful platform. Only recently, I heard of a story of a security vulnerability that was announced and publicly being exploited by hackers. And one of our customers was using Avantra to go and proactively check for each of their systems for that piece of software that was affected. And the ability to have a software solution like Avantra that will give you this customization ability to configure and check for these specific events and respond quickly. So you're not waiting for us to build static checks for you. You can build them around your own business case and your own needs. It's really powerful.
Fantastic. Well, this is the technical channel rather than the business channel. So why don't we dive in? I'm going to look at my one first, if that's all right, because there's one particular feature that I've been using quite a lot, which has really made my life a lot easier. So why don't we start there? We're also loving our new logon screen, and apparently this guy is looking very intently at the logon box. I don't know if he's going to steal my password or something, but anyway. So there we go. Let's go and log on. Don't you do that. And log on here. So the first feature that we want to show off has been a direct request from customers, I suppose it's fair to say, Ollie, around the development cycle. So write code, save it, activate it, send it to the agent, and then test it. And this was quite long for some customers, depending on the complexity of their environment and whatnot. And I kind of want to show off here some of what the team have put in. So if I go into custom checks, and I'm going to take a very basic custom check that I had here, which is the listening ports one. And for anybody who was watching one of my other videos on our add-ins, this is one of the checks that we're delivering with our add-ins around checking what ports are listening on a SUSE system, and it's all based on the SUSE hardening guide and whatnot. And so in this one, for example, it's sitting on a box, gdev ag1, and it's checking and it's showing that this particular machine is listening on port 22 for SSH and 9051 for the Avantra agent. I'm getting some really weird stuff with my UI when I do Zoom shares, but anyway. So developing this check is just the usual. You're using the full development environment. Put it full screen and you can change stuff, and for all our add-ins our source code is open, so you guys can change it. And I'm just going to change this little text that it outputs at the end and say analysis complete with no /some/any/ Ollie illegal ports just for the sake of fun, just to show it off. So once I've made that change, I hit OK, and now I have this new button up here called execute test run. And this is really cool. So if I go in here, I can select a system to actually do my tests on. So as long as that system exists in my system selector of where this check is deployed, I can select that system and hit test, and I get this instant feedback, like literally within half a second, with the changes as you all just saw me make. And I haven't had to save it, apply it, activate it, and then send to agent. It's just been a couple of seconds. That's probably my favorite of the changes that we've made in the development environment. But Ollie, I suppose this is probably just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh yeah, but this is actually one of my favorites as well. It makes it super easy to build custom checks, and just to play around with the API, and the whole shortening of that test check dev test cycle.
Right.
It's really, really important to get the most out of the features of Avantra.
Yep, absolutely. And you can see there I was getting instant feedback when I had done something I shouldn't have, which was actually break break the whole thing. But so there we go. Okay, so that's probably that feature. Why don't we jump over to your system and look at the next few, Ollie?
Yeah, sure. Let me. Hopefully you can see my screen now. So we're now in my local Avantra. So I'm not breaking it anyone else's testing. And we're into the welcome screen. And what I want to show you, actually, what I really want to show you first is where do you find more information about how to get started with developing on Avantra. And with 2111, quite as a separate standalone project, we've actually spent quite a bit of time building out our API documentation. So you can see here a preview, which will be live by the time you're watching this on YouTube. But our API documentation is now brought out into its own little section on our documentation website, where we can talk about the various different APIs within Avantra. So we have a node for the JavaScript API, and you can read about the different locations where we can do extensions to Avantra, so custom checks, automation actions, or the new script-based notification channel that's new in 2111. And then you can see on the left-hand side here, we've got detailed guides for each of these, basically taking through how to create a custom check from scratch, sort of reporting the status of that check, the different options available, reporting messages, displaying tables or tabular, more detailed output, and then writing performance values so you can actually do custom graphs and charts. Is really, really awesome. Some features that if you've been using Avantra for a while, you may know about, but some of the things may be a surprise to you how powerful this is. And then you expand it a bit further. Depending on where your custom check or your automation is running, you may have different building blocks, called building blocks here. So if it's running on an SAP system, for example, you have access to call SAP function modules. Or if it's running anywhere, you have the ability to call web services, or to call programs if it's running on a server, or make database queries if it's running against a database server, etc. And so these are quite cool, where you can skip through a code walkthrough about how the API works. And then we have some lovely examples that have been rewritten with the new JavaScript version that we have in 2111. So that's ECMAScript, I think 2021. So it's really bleeding edge, latest version. So you can do some quite cool stuff. And then we also have, with 21.11, 2 new APIs. So the first brand new API is around calling web services. So before we had this HTTP global object that was available in your scripts. We still have that, of course, for backward compatibility, but now we have this web global object, which allows you to do requests and get the response in a very, sort of 2 or 3 lines of code. There's not
much more elegant, right?
Here.
It's less back and forth and instantiating random objects, and more, hey, I just want information from this URL, and that's what I really like.
I just want this URL. And what we found when we were developing ourselves, and we've seen customers do it as well, some of the web services return an XML format instead of JSON.
Mm-hmm.
JSON is really easy to parse, and JSON.parse, and just get an answer. But XML is quite difficult to do without any third-party libraries. So what we've done is built that in as well here, so you get this JSON object that represents the XML. So if you're doing, specifically if you're doing automations around SAP control, that API is sort of a SOAP-based API. It's going to return you some XML, and you can use this new API to sort of parse it and understand it much cleaner than the alternatives that we'd seen previously, which usually involves some sort of text parsing, which is
regular
nice
expressions.
Yes.
Always fun.
The second check, it's not really a new API, but it's an enhancement to an existing one. So we had the ability to call SAP remote function calls, make SAP remote function calls within custom JavaScript-based checks and custom JavaScript JavaScript-based automation actions, and essentially getting the parameters into that call was a bit difficult. We sort of just gave you the access to the standard SAP way of doing it, and that was a bit complicated and wasn't very JavaScripty. And what we've got now is this new the existing methods still exist, but we've added now is with parameter, where you can pass in a singular value to this IV input parameter on the set test function module, or you can do with parameters and set maybe the importing value, the changing value, the tables value. And if you actually want to use sort of structured values, so in ABAP, that would be a database structure, so SE11 structured format, or a table, sort of table type, which would be an internal table in ABAP. In JavaScript, we've mapped these to objects and to arrays. So
it just looks like JSON to me. It looks like you're essentially passing in JSON objects.
Pretty much.
As you say, it makes it a lot more understandable for JavaScript experts to come and figure out how they interact with an SAP system. For SAP experts who are, let's face it, picking up JavaScript in all ways, in shapes and forms, they can quite easily put this together as well. So I think this is a lot easier than the previous way we used to do it.
Yeah, this is our internal developers have been loving this sort of this change, because it makes understanding what you're passing and
a lot easier.
A lot easier to You don't have this undocumented sort of API that you had to kind of grapple with. Speaking of documentation of the API, so we're talking about sort of code walkthroughs at the beginning, but at the bottom of each of these pages on the left here, we have API reference. So specifically for this for this API, we have this global variable RFC connection, and you can see that these are all hyperlinks, and you can see this RFC connection is an object of this type, and you can click there again, and you can see, oh, this object has these functions. These are the parameters it takes. This is what it returns, and you can kind of navigate around, and even in these the documentation of these methods, you actually have some examples of how to call them as well.
Fantastic.
Where we're planning to go with this is to actually produce some TypeScript declarations, so that you can actually import them into your external editor and have autocomplete and API documentation. But we're not quite there yet.
It's a journey. It's
definitely on the roadmap. So that's about the API documentation. What I also wanted to show is so actually to going through the process and actually recapping a little on what you talked about, Brenton, which is the test function of a check. So I actually want to go in and create a custom check. So in configuration here, custom checks. I have a very
you do lots of developments, clearly.
Brand new system that I cleaned up specifically for this. I'm going to click new in the corner, go down to the bottom and hit all, and then scroll down to run.js. And I'm going to call it mastering Avantra demo, and I'm going to create it on a server, I think. Yes, because first want to show you is the new API for calling web services in action. So what we're going to do is use the Northwind OData service, which is an example API. I'm going to paste my. I'm actually going to define a system selector. For test purposes.
Right. So yes. So while you're pasting that in, so it is right, because I think I hit this earlier as well, which is that even though you've not applied or activated your check or saved anything, you would need to select a system selector before you can execute test runs and save stuff. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, certainly. So if it won't actually allow you to save it without a system selector.
Yep.
So if I go in here, I'm actually going to do for this demo purpose is just going to hit save and close, which just creates a generic. This is applicable to every server you have, which is fine for me because I'm locally developing and it doesn't matter if it's.
But I suppose what's key here, Ollie, is that even though you have done that, this check is in a disabled or deactivated state. So it's not been pushed out to any agents yet, and you can still execute your test runs.
Yes. So what I'm actually going to do next is hit apply, and then a prompt says, "Do you want to activate this?" And I'm going to say no, and I'm going to leave it saved in a deactivated state. You can see this the red cross here, and what I'm going to do is just paste in this code that I've created beforehand. It's actually one of the examples on the API documentation site, so you can follow along if you like. And what we see here is that we're creating a URL, which is only formatted this way so it doesn't extend
clarity of reading. Yeah,
clarity of reading. And then we're going to use in one line. We're going to call the web object. We're going to request that URL from the web object, which creates a request object. After this point, we could set authorization. We could set a body.
Sure.
To send some data to that service. But what we're actually going to do is just fetch it, and which creates a response.
Okay.
And this response has a few values on it. So we have actually res.body, which is the raw body of that response. We have, if it's XML, we have res.xml, which we're going to interrogate, or if it's JSON, we're going to have res.json.
And that's what we see that you're using there later on.
That's what we see at the bottom here, where we're just looping through that as we would do any JSON object and printing that out. And I don't have to hit save or anything here because I can use the test function. You can see the servers available here, and I'm just going to choose one of these, drag this window up here, and there you go.
Cool.
You can see the categories from the north window data service.
Now, I noticed that you did that subtly. You dragged that out of the way. So don't you have to close that to go back to development?
Nope. That is the beauty of this. So I can actually add extra things here. Hello world. And then just hit the test. Semicolons are actually optional in the latest JavaScript. So
I can't agree with that.
Yeah, I do prefer semicolons.
Me too. But no, that is fantastic though, Ollie. And you know what we just seen there is the new web API and the whole development paradigm. You have your test window, you have your development window side by side at all times, and you can just keep going back and forth. So this develop test cycle is just ridiculously short now. That's fantastic.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do now is actually switch, and those familiar with OData will know that it's only JSON format because I have this format equals JSON at the end.
Yep.
So I can actually remove this and I get XML back. Unfortunately, this is looking at XML, so I need to then actually query the XML object with my response. So just going to paste in again the example from the documentation, and we can see we have to do a little bit more processing. But the XML returned is a bit more verbose than the JSON, and from that XML we can grab all of its children, and then we can filter out the children that are entries, and then for each entry we're just going to grab the properties object. And then for each of that forms our categories. And then for each of those categories, we print out the category ID and the category name. So if I test this again, I don't have to save. I can test this again, and I should, in theory, get the same response, minus the hello world. Because the demo.
Fantastic. So that's the XML one. And yeah, OData XML tends to be a little bit full of stuff. Let's be nice about it.
It is a lot more verbose, but sometimes you don't get the choice of which format.
Right. Ollie, in the interest of time, shall we scoot on to I know you want to do a little bit on an SAP system. Shall we show that off before we finish up?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply this so it saves it for later. I'm actually going to go all the way over into configuration and into automations. And I'm going to drop into our new workflow or automation builder and create a new automation here. So I'm going to call it MA a demo again. I'm going to give it a namespace of my user and then hit create. So this is using our new workflow automation feature, which is brand new in 21.11. But the process.
And if you want more information, there's another video with myself and Ollie covering how to use this automation engine step by step, which is also available on our YouTube channel. So please do check that out. It's a good watch.
It is indeed. So I'm going to create a workflow step, and I'm going to create a run.js atomic step, and this is going to be my unlock user.
Nice. This is the one you and I were discussing earlier.
Yes, indeed. So I'm going to double click this. I'm going to set a constant value. So this workflow step at the moment requires a script value to execute, and then we're going to choose a system to execute that on. So I'm going to choose a constant value for this, and then I'm going to choose my SAP system, which is NPL, the local local development system. So let me bring up my cheat sheet, and I'm going to paste in the code that the code that calls, it's a very simple BAPI called BAPI user unlock. And what we do here is we're using the new API for SAP RFCs. We're going to set the parameter is an importing parameter to this function module to test user, and then we're going to execute it. And then when we've executed it, we can actually grab the return table into messages. And what we do with messages is simply we're going to grab only the types of messages. So the type field. So if you're familiar with SAP, it's going to be an error, a warning, a success message, or maybe even worse, a bend or an X. And then we're going to say, so this then creates an array of just those types, and then we're going to filter out the ones that are not S's and not W's. And then if we have some entries left in that table, we obviously have some errors. So that's what sets the success of the step. Then we set some messages out, and then we actually also create some logs as well. So we're just simply using JavaScript to process the basically JSON output from the function module from this new API. And then on failure, I'm going to set stop. Let's apply that. Let's apply the whole workflow, and then execute. I don't have any inputs to define on this workflow, so I'm going to just hit run. And then we wait for the script to execute, and then you can see that, hey, the BAPI is run successfully.
Nice. That's really cool. So you've just basically written JavaScript, similar to the custom checks, JavaScript-based custom checks. You've written and used the same API that we just saw in the custom checks in the automation engine itself, which allows you to interact with those SAP systems. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really simple to get to grips with. The documentation is all there to walk you step by step through how to do each of these steps. And literally, the examples I've shown you here are actually on the API documentation site, so they're well worth playing around with and taking a look and see what you can do in your environment.
Brilliant. Well, Ollie, I think that's pretty much all we have time for today. If you want to stop your screen share. But I want to thank you for taking us through that and showing us those new APIs, showing us the new API documentation and some of those new ways of developing. It really is hopefully going to make developers and those of you watching your lives a little bit easier. As always, we welcome feedback. If there's something we don't have that you'd like to see or whatever the case may be, please do let us know. We really would like to see more. If not, well, we encourage you to check out the rest of the Mastering Avantra videos you'll see on the rest of this playlist. There's a lot of the stuff that we're trying to cover is within 21.11 and some of the new features that you can look through. But for now, from myself and from Ollie, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.